TikTok roast.
The explosion would rip a hole in the plane, causing an explosive decompression, which basically means that the pressure difference whirling at your body could actually rip you apart.
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel 7-4 Gear is all about aviation. I want to thank all of you in the 7-4 crew for tagging me in different TikToks that people put out that's full of misinformation or asking me if something is true or sending it to me on my Instagram. I appreciate all of you. This video had so much bad information in it that I decided instead of putting it in with a bunch of other videos, I would give it its own special video. Let's get into it.
If you like to know every fact about the things that you fear, then this video is for you. If you're in a crashing plane, you won't be informed. Unless a pilot performs a controlled crash landing, they will not have time to tell you that you're about to die, and that's probably for the best.
It is true that during an emergency, the priority that every pilot is going to have is first to fly the plane and deal with getting the aircraft worked out and level and dealing with the emergency. However, Jade, next time you're on a flight, you can make a special request that the pilots don't fly the plane and don't worry about navigating or anything like that, and they can just immediately call back to the cabin and let everybody in the back of the plane know what's going on. Until that time happens, though, the priority will always be aviate, navigate, and then communicate, meaning we want to fly the plane first, make sure that the wings are level and that it's going in a good direction. That's navigating, because it doesn't matter if you're flying and your wings are level and your plane is climbing or holding an altitude if you fly into a mountain. So it makes no sense to not be dealing with that next. And then the last thing that you're going to do is communicate. And typically that's going to be to air traffic control, letting them know what's going on so they can get you back around to an airport. Then after all of those things are worked out, then there might be a message back to the passengers. I know you might be thinking, well, I'm going to be back in the back and I'm going to be scared. That's true. You might be scared, but better to have been scared for a little bit than dead. So when she says this,
if you're in a crashing plane, you won't be informed.
It is true, but it's very misleading. If you saw the Hollywood versus reality that I did on Sully, you'll notice that he was busy talking with the first officer, Jeff, and they were working on flying the plane, figuring out where the plane was going to go and all of that stuff, and they were ignoring some of the air traffic control radio calls. They only made one call to the cabin crew, and that was brace for impact, or prepare for impact, or whatever it was that he said. So that was the only call that got pushed back into the back of the cabin because the priority was getting the plane to be flying, trying to restart the engines, figuring out where the plane was going to go. That was the priority of what was going on. And when air traffic control was asking them some different things, they just worried about flying the plane first and navigating where they were going to go. So then she says this.
Unless a pilot performs a controlled crash landing, they will not have time to tell you that you're about to die, and that's probably for the best.
Reality is that there's never going to be a situation that any pilot, or any good pilot at least, that they're going to give up and just say, oh, never mind, we're going to crash, you're all going to die. That's not what's going to happen. The pilots are going to be fighting and trying to fix the problem regardless of what the situation is, because at the end of the day, self-preservation is pretty much every human's natural gut instinct. So the pilots and all of our training is going to be trying to work out different problems, and that's to save ourselves, but also everyone that's on the plane. So her saying that we're not going to make that announcement that you're going to die, that is obvious because that is not something that a pilot is going to say, oh, no, that's it, we're dead, we're going to die. No, they're going to be always fighting. And there's a lot of different cases I can go over where the pilots actually fly the plane or try to fight with the plane to get it back onto the ground safely. And in some cases it worked, and in some cases it didn't work. But the pilots are always going to be giving their maximum effort to get the plane safely on the ground again. That's always going to be a case. I've read a lot of reports on different crash investigations, and the reason behind that is because I want to learn what the pilots did well and what they didn't do well. I can learn from the mistakes that they made so I can hopefully avoid those if I ever end up in a similar situation. So I read a lot of those and learn from the things they did well and what they didn't do well. I've never read in any report that I've ever seen, I've never read where the pilots have something go wrong and they just go, oh, that's it, we're going to die, no big deal, unless it was just something that was imminent. There are some cases where they had messed up some things, and this was way back in the day, like 80s, 90s, things like that, where they didn't have the technology that we have now with ground proximity warning systems and things like that, where they've messed some things up and they're about to hit the mountain or something like that, where the pilots just say, uh-oh, like they know that it's over at that point. But typically speaking, when I'm looking at these reports, there are rarely ever cases where the pilots mess something up or something goes wrong on the plane and they just go, oh well, we're dead. That's not how pilots are built. I know when I'm walking onto a 747 that's full of 400 or so passengers, I know the responsibility that I'm going to have, and I take that very seriously, and I'm going to fly the plane and always do the very best that I can in every flight that I'm going to do. However, she was right on this particular point here.
If you'd like to know every fact about the things that you fear, then this video is for you.
I think it's very true that if you are scared about something, it's good to research it and learn about it and understand it. And that's why I like doing different radio interviews or TV interviews, and not all of them make it onto my channel, but I do a lot of those because I like to answer questions that people have, because a lot of times if people are scared or they don't know, they don't really have someone to go to. So when I go do these different radio interviews, a lot of times I don't know what they're going to ask me about. I'm just kind of answering off the cuff as people ask me different things. And I like giving that information because it's real questions that your everyday person would have who could be scared or could have a question or a concern or something about aviation. So I like doing that. However, people like Jade and some people in the media like to sensationalize things and show burning, crashing, blowing up and things like that and make it seem so dangerous. And they do that because it gets a reaction. When you're doing death and destruction, people get clicks and they get views, and that's why they do that. So that's why Jade is doing this. Let's see what other scary facts Jade has for us.
If your plane nosedives, you can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that you will not remain conscious. But right before things go black, you might experience a sense of weightlessness. Objects around you and your arms will just hover as if in space. Once the plane actually makes impact, in all likelihood, it will be over before it began. The G-force can be that of around 12 times of gravity, which would shatter your bones and destroy your organs, but it's unlikely that you would feel any of it.
I'm not sure what Jade is considering a nosedive, but I have heard of and seen a lot of different commercial pilots where they have to do a very steep or rapid descent. A lot of the times, if that happens, don't be concerned or alarmed. What's happening is air traffic control is asking them to get down to a lower level or lower altitude very quickly. So what they'll do is they'll put those things out on the wings, they're called speed brakes, and the wings go up, and then the nose of the plane will go down very quickly. That's nothing to be alarmed of. So when she says this,
if your plane nosedives, you can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that you will not remain conscious.
it literally makes no sense. And we have a term called being slam dunked in the airlines, and that's usually when you're coming into an airport and they're keeping you at a high altitude for whatever reason. There could be traffic below or who knows what, but they keep you at that very high altitude, and then they want you to get down very quickly, or they want you to get down and slow down very quickly, and that's not what jets are really designed to do. So we have to do things to slow down and to get down quickly, and that's called being slam dunked. There's nothing risky or dangerous. I have done it many times. I have yet to fall unconscious once or have any of my passengers go unconscious once, and I've done some very steep descents. But this part was really funny.
But right before things go black, you might experience a sense of weightlessness.
That only happens if your pilots were to do a maneuver that resulted in a negative G-force. So you hear about G-forces with fighter pilots, and they might have 10 or 12 Gs, and that's that weight of their body that's pushing them into their seat. If you were to have a negative version of that, you would start floating like you're in space. And every commercial aircraft that I've ever read the manual for doesn't allow you to do a negative G maneuver. It doesn't allow you to nose the plane over. So the way that you would do that, or the way that I've seen people do that, sometimes in flight school, and I'm not endorsing this, and I of course would never do that, but if you were climbing on your plane and you were climbing to an altitude, and while you were climbing up, you push rapidly over and you nose the plane over while the momentum of your aircraft is going up, you can create a negative G, and everything in the plane will start floating. However, if you're flying on a normal aircraft and the pilots decide to rapidly descend, like being slam dunked like I talked about earlier, you will not see everything in the cabin just start flying up in the air like it's in space. However, she did get this part right.
The G-force can be that of around 12 times of gravity, which would shatter your bones and destroy your organs, but it's unlikely that you would feel any of it.
If your plane nosedives into the ground, there will be a lot of G-forces there. But that's not really the main problem that's going to be an issue. It's going to be the fact that you got pancaked into the ground. That's going to be the issue, not the G-forces. Another scenario I want to give you is imagine you jump in your Uber driver. So you're riding along in this Prius, sorry, Uber drivers, but you're riding along in this Prius, and the Prius jumps off of a bridge and then goes off of this bridge and then falls a few hundred feet into the river. And it's like, if the ground and the impact doesn't kill you, the water will, and you'll start drowning. The truth is that the G-forces don't really matter if you are in a car and the driver at 100 miles an hour drives directly into a wall, or they drive off of a bridge and fall a few hundred feet. The G-forces are pretty much irrelevant. So the question becomes is, do you feel uncomfortable that you got into a car with somebody that you don't know that maybe paid $16 in order to have the right to drive you around? Or do you want to get into an aircraft where an airline has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on two different people to safely transport you with people on the ground that are watching that plane to make sure that there is nothing that happens, and there's a whole bunch of people, a whole team that is behind everybody that is on that plane to safely get it onto the ground? So you see Jade is taking something here and this dramatic pictures that she's using to make it seem very, very scary that you're getting into a plane, yet you do something maybe every day, getting into an Uber, getting into a Lyft, or getting into a car and riding as a passenger, or getting into a car and realizing that there are a bunch of other cars around you that you have no control over and you're going to drive down the road every day. But using all these pictures and the way that she's talking, she's making it seem like a very scary thing. And before you think, oh, well, of course this pilot says this because he wants people to fly because that's where he makes his money, 98% of all my flying is cargo. So it really doesn't make any difference to me whether you fly on my plane or not. And when I am flying passengers, it's usually professional sports teams, which they have to get on the plane if they want to get paid, or it's the military, which they also have to get on the plane if they want to get paid, and they don't really have an option either way. So it doesn't matter to me if she says these things to scare people and you decide, oh, I don't want to fly, I want to drive. It makes no difference to my life, but I just think it's irresponsible for someone to get out and put all this misinformation out there. Let's see what she says next.
If your plane explodes, you will be dead before the crash. The explosion would rip a hole in the plane, causing an explosive decompression, which basically means that the pressure difference whirling at your body could actually rip you apart.
Did she just say that an explosive decompression will rip your body apart?
Basically means that the pressure difference whirling at your body could actually rip you apart.
So, Jade, unfortunately, that's really not how that works. What happens if you have an explosive decompression, what will happen is your ears will pop, it will get very loud, it will get very cold, it could get very misty in the plane, oxygen masks are gonna fall, you will probably hear your engines go to idle, your plane will pitch over aggressively, not in that free fall state that you talked about earlier, but it will go down very quickly, and that's so that the pilots can get the plane to an altitude where everybody can breathe. So those are some things that will go on. Your body will not rip apart because we're not flying around in space. If you were to climb Mount Everest, you'd get to almost 30,000 feet, and that means under Jade's mythical space rules, at 30,000 feet your body would explode because that is the altitude that the plane will pressurize to if the plane was flying at 30,000 feet. There are multiple examples of planes having explosive decompressions and everybody on the plane, or most everybody on the plane, living, and the people that didn't live, it's not because their body ripped apart like Jade is explaining here. The biggest risk that you'll have during an explosive decompression is actually your pilots up front getting their oxygen mask on. That doesn't mean that you as a passenger, if you fail to get your oxygen mask on right away, it doesn't mean like, oh, you're going to die. No, the reason that we as pilots need to get our mask on quickly is because there's less and less useful consciousness as you go higher and higher. So at 30,000 feet, you might have a certain amount of seconds of useful consciousness, and at 40,000 feet, you're going to have a lot less. It gets down to a couple of seconds as you get really, really high. And you have to keep in mind that during an explosive decompression, there's going to be a couple seconds of confusion. What's happening? What's going on? Because everything that you're experiencing on the back, we're experiencing up front as well. So getting our mask on as quickly as possible is really the highest risk, and that's why there's two pilots up there. One might get it on and one might not. So once we get our mask on, what we're going to be doing is nosing the plane over as fast as we can to get to 10,000 feet safely, so that way for those of you who did not get your mask on, you will start breathing again normally. It doesn't mean that if you don't get your mask on that you're going to die. No, you might pass out, but you will not die. So we'll get to 10,000 feet or whatever safe altitude as quickly as we can, and that will allow for you to start breathing whether you got your oxygen mask on time or not, or you passed out. So that's what's going to happen there. That doesn't mean that once we get to 10,000 feet that everything's fine. There's a good chance that some of you will need to change your shorts once we get there.
You will lose your vision, followed by your sense of clarity, and finally all consciousness once in a free fall. So in all honesty, it sounds horrific, but it would be relatively painless and fast.
Okay, she said something else that is true. If you didn't get your mask on in time, you could have this.
You will lose your vision, followed by your sense of clarity, and finally all consciousness.
There is a term called hypoxia, and that term, what it means is basically your body isn't getting enough oxygen. And at 30,000 feet or higher, there's not a lot of oxygen up there. And so in that event that you're not getting enough oxygen, your body will go hypoxic. And with being in hypoxia, what happens is there is a It's different for every pilot, by the way, or every person. Everybody's going to have different reactions to hypoxia, but one of those can be that you can be euphoric or feel like everything is fine even though you're in a very dangerous situation. So that is true, and you could go unconscious because you're not getting enough oxygen. So what she's saying is true, but she's just saying it in a weird way. There are some aircraft that during an explosive decompression, what will happen with the autopilot on is that the plane will actually pull the throttles all the way back, turn onto its side, and then descend rapidly to 10,000 or a safe altitude, but they'll descend rapidly to that altitude in the event that the pilots didn't get their masks on in time. So there are planes that have things set up in place that in the event that something were to happen, explosive decompression, because people were disoriented, that they rapidly get down to a safe altitude and then the pilots can regain consciousness again and get out of that hypoxic state. So it is true that you can lose your consciousness and feel okay. Those things that she's saying is true, but for different reasons than what she's saying. But in this final part of the clip where she says this,
So in all honesty, it sounds horrific, but it would be relatively painless and fast.
just because a plane has an explosive decompression doesn't mean that everybody on the plane is now getting ejected from the plane or the bodies are breaking apart. None of that is true. It is true, planes do crash, yes, and so do cars. But it doesn't mean that you can live your whole life in a bunker, growing your own food, never going outside, and being as pasty white as me. However, if you want to see what Hollywood thinks about explosive decompressions, and surprise, spoiler alert, they don't know how it happens either, check out this video here. And if you want to see some other TikTokers who know nothing about aviation, just like our friend Jade here, but yet give all kinds of information that is also incorrect, check out this video up here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.